Captain Kieran Thorne stood at the edge of the hangar, watching the last few members of his team scramble to prepare their gear. The hum of the ship's engines reverberated through the floor beneath his boots, and he felt the familiar anxiety build in his chest. It was the calm before the storm, the moment when every soldier's mind raced with the same question: will I make it out alive? Ready to go, Captain! Lieutenant Ramirez's voice broke through the tension. She was already suited up, her weapons checked and secured. But her face, despite its stoic exterior, carried the weight of what was to come. This mission wasn't just another raid. It wasn't just about gathering intel, or a simple strike against an enemy base. This mission had humanity's future riding on it. Kieran turned to face her, his jaw set firmly. We move out in 5 minutes, he said, his voice flat. We'll hit the Wraithlord research facility, secure whatever intel we can, and get the hell out. No heroics. Ramirez nodded. Understood, Captain? The door to the hangar bay slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing the sleek, gunmetal-gray transport ship that would carry them to the heart of enemy territory. The Wraithlords had long been a threat to humanity, and their attempts to enslave the human race had escalated. But the intel they'd gathered from the last few skirmishes hinted at something far more dangerous. The Wraithlords weren't just interested in conquest anymore. They were experimenting with humanity's very genetics, altering DNA to create hybrid warriors, super soldiers that could potentially turn the tide of the war in the Wraithlords' favor. The team filed into the ship, the cold, metallic air of the hangar giving way to the warmth of the transport's interior. The hum of the engines grew louder as the ship's systems powered up, and Kieran took a seat at the helm. The rest of the crew strapped into their seats, their faces hardening with resolve. Deploy in 10, Kieran said, his eyes scanning the coordinates on the navigation screen. His mind was sharp, calculating. He couldn't afford to let the enormity of the mission weigh him down. They weren't just going to recover intel from an enemy facility. They were going to uncover a secret that, if left unchecked, could change the course of the galaxy forever. Humanity had no idea the true scale of the Wraithlord's plan, and Kieran wasn't going to let it slip through their fingers. The ship jolted slightly as it broke free from the docking bay, the stars outside swirling into streaks of light as they shot through space. Kieran watched as the familiar sight of the fleet grew smaller in the distance, the fleet that had fought tooth and nail to keep Earth's last remaining colonies intact. 15 minutes to target, Ramirez said, her voice cutting through the stillness of the cabin. She was the team's eyes, always alert, always calculating. Do you think the Wraithlords are expecting us? Kieran's eyes narrowed. They're always expecting us. We'll be ready for anything. The ship glided through the blackness of space, silent and swift. But the moment they entered Wraithlord territory, Kieran knew things would get complicated. The Wraithlords had already begun fortifying their research facilities across the galaxy, and this one was no different. It sat on a barren, uninhabited moon orbiting a dying star. A perfect place for secrecy, and a deadly trap if they weren't careful. They couldn't afford to be caught. The Wraithlords' experiments were far too dangerous to leave unchecked. Humanity's survival depended on keeping these weapons out of their hands. But Kieran couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into a trap. Approaching the facility, Kieran said, his voice cold and focused. Get ready. The ship shook slightly as they broke through the atmosphere of the moon, and the massive, imposing structure of the Wraithlord facility came into view. It was a fortress, a labyrinth of cold, angular walls and watchtowers. Their ship's sensors pinged, indicating a high concentration of enemy activity. Stealth systems engaged, Kieran ordered, and the ship's exterior shimmered as it activated its cloaking device. They'd need every advantage they could get. The Wraithlords were known for their vigilance. Land on the east side, Kieran directed, studying the facility's layout on the screen in front of him. It's the least fortified. Once we're down, we'll move fast. We breach, secure the data, and get out. No delays. The transport ship lowered toward the surface, its landing gears gently making contact with the rocky ground. Kieran's mind was already calculating their next moves, running through every contingency. The mission was straightforward: but the risks were high. There was no room for failure. "Touchdown," Ramirez said, confirming the landing. Kieran took a deep breath and unstrapped himself from his seat. The moment he stood, he felt the weight of the mission pressing down on him. It wasn't just about the data. It was about the survival of the human race. The Wraithlords' plan, if they succeeded in creating hybrid soldiers, could spell the end of humanity's resistance. And if that happened, Earth would fall. His team filed out, weapons at the ready, as they moved toward the facility's entrance. They moved in silence, their footsteps muffled by the rocky surface beneath their boots. Kieran's eyes scanned the perimeter as they approached the main door, noting every movement, every shift in the shadows. The Wraithlords would be watching, waiting for them to make a mistake. He couldn't afford that. As they reached the door, Ramirez moved forward to place a small explosive charge. The countdown began, and with a soft hiss, the door slid open. The team filed in quickly, weapons raised, but the room beyond was eerily silent. "We've been compromised," Kieran muttered under his breath as he surveyed the empty corridor. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. "Captain," Ramirez called out urgently. "You need to see this." Kieran followed her voice, turning to find her standing over a terminal. The screen displayed a set of coordinates that didn't match any of their intelligence. The location was deep within the facility, hidden from their original scans. "Data's been red flagged," Ramirez said, her voice tight. "They knew we were coming." Kieran's stomach twisted. He wasn't just walking into a trap. He was the bait. And the Wraithlords had been waiting for him. "This just got a hell of a lot more complicated," Kieran said, his voice laced with cold fury. As the team prepared to move deeper into the facility, Kieran's thoughts raced. They had to move quickly, but now they were up against more than just Wraithlord soldiers. They were fighting against time, and against the secrets humanity was not yet ready to uncover. "Let's go," Kieran ordered. "Time's running out." The team nodded, moving out with precision, each of them bracing for what was about to come. But as they turned the corner, Kieran's heart sank. A new enemy was waiting for them. And this time, it wasn't just the Wraithlords they had to worry about. The trap was set. The silence inside the Wraithlord facility was suffocating. Kieran Thorne moved down the sterile corridor, the cold, metallic walls reflecting the faint hum of his team's footsteps. The air felt thick, as if every inch of the facility was laced with tension, waiting for the moment the trap would snap shut around them. Kieran's heart beat steadily, but his mind was sharp, calculating, always 5 steps ahead. The mission had just taken a dangerous turn. They weren't supposed to find the hidden data so soon. The coordinates Ramirez had found on the terminal were a surprise, a location deep within the facility, far beyond their original objective. The Wraithlords had clearly anticipated their every move, but what did they know? And why was the data being protected so fiercely? "Captain," Ramirez's voice came through his comms, her voice tight with urgency. "I'm seeing heavy energy signatures up ahead. The facility's core power systems are redirecting energy. They're powering up something big." Kieran paused. The last thing he wanted was to walk into a fully operational Wraithlord weapon. "Can you identify the source?" he asked. "No," Ramirez replied. "But whatever it is, it's big. They're preparing for something." Kieran cursed under his breath. Their time was running out. They had to move fast. "We need to reach that data vault now," Kieran said, his voice sharp. "Stick to the plan. No detours." The team nodded, their eyes scanning every corner of the darkened hallway. As they rounded a corner, Kieran's fingers hovered over his weapon. Every sense was on high alert. He felt the walls close in as the tension built, a storm brewing in the heart of the facility. A sudden noise broke the stillness, a low hum that gradually grew louder. The air crackled with energy. "Incoming," Anderson warned, his rifle raised. A door to their left slid open, and Kieran's instincts kicked in. He grabbed Ramirez's arm, pulling her back just as a burst of energy shot out from the doorway. The blast scorched the wall near them, sending a shower of sparks into the air. "Move!" Kieran shouted, his team already reacting to the new threat. They dove for cover, weapons raised, as more energy blasts filled the hallway. Kieran's mind raced. They were walking into a trap, but this wasn't just a trap, it was something worse. The Wraithlords had known exactly where they'd be, and they had prepared accordingly. "Captain!" Ramirez yelled over the comms. "The energy signatures are coming from the vault. They've locked it down, but they're not stopping there. They've set up automated defense turrets, and I'm guessing they're expecting us." Kieran's stomach churned. They had to reach that vault, but the cost was rising with every step. The Wraithlords were making sure there would be no escape for anyone who tried to uncover their secrets. "Keep pushing forward," Kieran ordered. "We need that intel. We don't leave without it." The team moved with practiced precision, crossing the open space between the doorways and ducking for cover as the automated turrets opened fire. Kieran's mind was already calculating their next move. If they could disable the power source powering the turrets, they'd have a window to access the vault. "Tran," Kieran said, his eyes scanning the control panel beside them. "Can you take out the power grid?" Lila Tran didn't hesitate. She dropped to one knee, her hands flying over the panel's interface. "Give me a second, Captain. It's locked, but I can bypass it." Kieran kept his eyes on the entrance as the rest of the team provided cover. "Hurry up, Lila. We don't have much time." There was a pause, a tense moment where the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Tran looked up, a brief flash of triumph in her eyes. "Done! The grid's down. The turrets are offline." Without waiting for further orders, Kieran moved, his team following closely behind. They dashed for the vault entrance, the final stretch to their objective. The security systems had failed, but the Wraithlords were still on high alert. Kieran could feel the eyes of the enemy on them, even though he couldn't see them. As they reached the vault, Kieran knew they were close to uncovering the secrets that could change everything. But just as he was about to step forward, the door to the vault opened on its own, revealing a room bathed in eerie, pulsating light. Inside, rows of data consoles lined the walls, but it was the central terminal that caught Kieran's attention. It was massive, covered in alien symbols and interfaces he didn't understand. But it was clear what it was. This was the heart of the Wraithlord's operation. The data here could change the entire galaxy's balance of power. "Move in!" Kieran commanded. His heart pounded in his chest as he approached the terminal, his team following close behind. Ramirez immediately moved to one of the consoles, trying to link in and download the data. But something was wrong. A low growl rumbled through the facility, and the lights flickered, casting everything in a harsh, red glow. Kieran turned to face his team, his instincts screaming that they weren't alone. "They know," he said quietly. "They've been waiting for us." A harsh voice, distorted but unmistakably authoritative, echoed through the room. "Did you think you could outwit us, human? You've only just begun to scratch the surface of our plans. The weapons you seek will be your undoing." Kieran's blood ran cold as the voice seemed to come from all around them. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with energy. A massive figure stepped from the shadows, its silhouette tall and imposing, its features hidden in the darkness. It was a Wraithlord. No, not just any Wraithlord. This one was different. It moved with the grace of a predator, its eyes glowing with malice as it studied Kieran and his team. "You have uncovered our greatest secret," the Wraithlord said, its voice like ice. "But you will never leave this place." The realization hit Kieran like a freight train. This wasn't just about the Deathworld weapons. The Wraithlords had known exactly what they were after. They had wanted them to come. The mission had always been a trap. And now Kieran realized they were about to pay the price. The Wraithlord stepped forward, its claws gleaming in the light. "Surrender now, or face extinction." Kieran gritted his teeth. They weren't going down without a fight. "Prepare for battle," Kieran barked. The trap had sprung. But the fight for humanity's survival had just begun. The Wraithlord's voice echoed in the room like the toll of a bell, a warning that sent a shiver down Kieran Thorne's spine. The situation had turned. What was supposed to be a quick strike, A surgical operation to extract critical data had spiraled into an all-out fight for survival. The Wraithlords had anticipated their every move, and now they were trapped, inside the heart of the enemy's stronghold, with no easy way out. Kieran stood his ground, his pulse steady as the Wraithlord towered over him, its red eyes glowing in the dim light. The creature's dark silhouette was almost regal, but there was no mistaking the deadly predator within. It moved like a shadow, its sleek, muscular body shifting with unnatural fluidity, making it impossible to predict its next move. "We have no interest in your weapons," Kieran said, his voice low but resolute, trying to regain control of the situation. He wasn't going to be intimidated. "We came for knowledge. If you're smart, you'll let us leave with what we've gathered." The Wraithlord's head tilted slightly, as though it was analyzing the human before it. "Knowledge?" It laughed, the sound a low, guttural growl. "You have no idea what you've uncovered, human. You think you understand the true power of the Deathworld weapons? The power to evolve your kind into something else?" Kieran's heart skipped a beat. The Wraithlord knew too much. The data they had uncovered, about genetic manipulation and the Wraithlord's plan to turn humanity into hybrid soldiers, was more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. But he had to keep his cool. He couldn't let the Wraithlord see the fear creeping into his chest. "We're not here to play your game," Kieran replied. "You're out of time. The fleet is coming. You can't stop us." The Wraithlord's eyes narrowed, its posture shifting as if it was preparing to strike. "You misunderstand, human. It is you who is out of time. I've been waiting for this moment. For you to come so close to understanding. You have no idea what you've triggered." Before Kieran could respond, the Wraithlord moved. It was faster than he expected, a blur of motion that made the air hum with energy. The alien lashed out, claws extended, and Kieran barely managed to dive out of the way in time. He scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding as he took a defensive stance. "Fall back!" Kieran yelled to his team, his mind racing. "We need to regroup. We can't take him head on." But it was already too late. The Wraithlord's attack had set off a chain reaction. The facility's emergency lights flickered, casting everything in a harsh red glow. The walls trembled as the sound of heavy footsteps, more Wraithlord soldiers, grew louder. They were surrounded. "Captain?" Ramirez shouted, her voice tight with fear. "They've locked the exits. We're trapped." Kieran cursed under his breath. The Wraithlords had anticipated everything. They had been herded into this trap, cornered at the very heart of their enemy's stronghold. But Kieran wasn't about to give up. He could see the data vault, the massive terminal that held everything they'd come for. If they could just get to it, they might still have a chance to escape with the information. "Cover me!" Kieran shouted. He turned and sprinted for the terminal, his boots pounding against the floor. His team followed, their rifles raised, firing at the advancing Wraithlord soldiers as they tried to clear a path. The Wraithlord general's deep, resonating voice echoed again, this time full of amusement. "Do you think you can escape? The moment you began interfering, you sealed your fate." Kieran reached the terminal, his fingers flying over the controls, desperately trying to access the data. Sweat beaded on his forehead as the tension in the air thickened. Behind him, the sounds of battle raged, but his focus was singular. They couldn't leave empty-handed. Not after everything they'd risked. "Ramirez, how much longer?" Kieran demanded, his voice strained. "Almost there." Ramirez's voice was tight, but she didn't stop working. "The encryption's tougher than I expected, but I've almost bypassed it. Just a few more seconds." Kieran glanced back just in time to see a Wraithlord soldier charge at him. He fired, the blast hitting the alien square in the chest, but the soldier kept coming. Another blast. Another shot. It fell, but more kept coming. The Wraithlords were relentless. "You won't stop us," Kieran muttered, his teeth gritted. He needed the data now. Their survival depended on it. The Wraithlord general growled again, stepping closer, its claws gleaming. "You will be the first to fall, human. And then, we will take everything you've worked so hard to protect." Your species will kneel before us. Kieran's blood ran cold, but he didn't flinch. His mind was sharp. Not today! He raised his rifle and fired another round, this time hitting the control panel next to the Wraithlord general. Sparks flew as the panel short-circuited, the room filled with a shrill noise as the facility's systems began to malfunction. What have you done? The Wraithlord hissed, its voice laced with fury. I bought us time, Kieran said, his voice colder than the steel around them. Enough time to finish this. Finally, Ramirez's voice came through, almost a whisper in the chaos. Got it, Captain? The date is ours. Good, Kieran said, turning toward her. Let's move. But the Wraithlord wasn't done yet. With a final, deafening roar, it charged. Kieran barely had time to react before the creature was upon him, its claws slashing through the air. The fight was no longer about just survival. It was about victory. Kieran ducked just in time, narrowly avoiding the Wraithlord's deadly blow. He retaliated, slamming his elbow into the creature's side and firing a shot point-blank into its chest. But the Wraithlord was a different breed of monster. Its healing systems kicked in almost instantly, and the wound began to close. Now! Kieran shouted to his team. He couldn't do this alone. Tran and Anderson opened fire, providing the distraction Kieran needed. The Wraithlord staggered back, temporarily stunned by the barrage of energy blasts. Kieran seized the moment. He grabbed a plasma grenade from his belt and tossed it at the Wraithlord's feet, diving for cover. The explosion rocked the room, sending the Wraithlord crashing to the floor, its body convulsing as its internal systems struggled to keep up with the damage. It was down, but not out. Move! Kieran shouted. The team bolted toward the exit, the data in hand. The Wraithlord general was still alive, but it wouldn't be able to stop them, not now. They rushed through the facility, their breaths heavy, hearts racing. The mission wasn't over yet, but they had what they came for. And the Wraithlords would regret underestimating humanity. Kieran didn't look back. There was no time for victory, only survival. The Wraithlords would return. But humanity, for the first time, had a fighting chance. The escape route was barely a path. Kieran Thorne and his team ran through the labyrinthine corridors of the Wraithlord facility, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the heavy thrum of the base's collapsing systems. The alarms blared in the distance, signaling that time was running out. They had the data, but the Wraithlords weren't finished yet. And neither was the fight. As they sprinted down the hallway, Kieran's mind raced. The Wraithlords had been expecting them, but they'd still managed to secure the most vital piece of information, a blueprint for humanity's next phase in the war. But the truth behind what the Wraithlords were working on wasn't what he'd expected. The Deathworld weapons weren't just a tool for destruction, they were part of something far more sinister. They were creating the next generation of humanity, engineered to be more than human. He couldn't allow that weapon to fall into the wrong hands, even if it meant losing everything. Captain? Ramirez called from behind, her voice strained but determined. We've reached the extraction point. The ship's on standby. Stay sharp, Kieran ordered, glancing back to see the team trailing behind. The urgency in his voice betrayed the cold exterior he maintained. We've got incoming. The facility shook again, a tremor strong enough to rattle the walls. It was clear the Wraithlords were detonating their self-destruct sequence, and the facility was going to implode if they didn't get off the moon soon. But just as they rounded the corner toward the transport ship, a new sound filled the air, a deafening roar. The Wraithlord general. Kieran's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't counted on facing it again. The blast had only incapacitated the creature for a moment, and now it was charging down the hallway toward them, its body smoldering with the remnants of the explosion, but still alive. It moved like lightning, faster than Kieran had anticipated, and before he could react, it was upon them. The team opened fire, but the Wraithlord was relentless. Kieran ducked as the creature slashed through the air with its razor-sharp claws, narrowly missing his head. The sound of energy blasts ricocheted off the walls as the team fought to hold their ground, but they were cornered. We don't have time for this. Kieran shouted, rolling behind a nearby pillar for cover. Fall back! Get to the ship! Captain, we can't leave without securing the data! Ramirez shouted, her voice full of urgency. Kieran's gaze locked onto her for a brief second, but he knew what had to be done. The mission was no longer just about extracting intel. They were fighting for their lives. We're not leaving anyone behind, Kieran growled, his voice low but resolute. Ramirez, Tran, cover me. I'll deal with the general. Ramirez hesitated but nodded. Be careful, Captain. Kieran moved out from behind cover, his weapon raised. The Wraithlord general loomed ahead, its glowing eyes full of hatred. It was injured, but still more dangerous than anything he'd faced. His pulse quickened, but he remained calm, focused. He couldn't afford to be reckless now. The Wraithlord charged, its claws slashing the air. Kieran fired, hitting it in the chest, but the creature barely flinched. It roared, a deafening sound that rattled the walls, before charging again, faster this time. Kieran dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's deadly claws. His mind raced, searching for an opening. He couldn't just keep dodging. He needed a plan. Ramirez, Tran! He shouted, signaling them to fire together. Now! The two fired in unison, their shots striking the Wraithlord's weak points. The creature faltered, but it wasn't enough to bring it down. Kieran saw his chance. He leapt forward, using his momentum to close the distance between him and the Wraithlord general. With a fluid motion, he hurled a plasma grenade at its feet. The explosion sent the creature stumbling backward, its armor smoking from the blast. It was disoriented, just long enough for Kieran to make his move. He rushed forward, slamming his blade into the Wraithlord's side, striking where its armor was weakest. The creature roared in pain, its body convulsing, but it didn't stop. Instead, it lashed out, catching Kieran off guard and sending him flying into the wall. Pain shot through his ribs as he hit the floor hard, but Kieran didn't have time to recover. He forced himself up, blood staining his shirt as he gritted his teeth against the agony. The Wraithlord was ready for another strike, but Kieran knew he couldn't give it a chance. Now! Kieran yelled again, his voice hoarse. Ramirez fired another shot, this time aimed directly at the creature's head. The blast struck its eye, sending a spray of dark fluid splattering across the floor. The Wraithlord general stumbled, finally collapsing to the ground in a heap, its body twitching one last time before it went still. Kieran took a deep breath, shaking off the dizziness that threatened to overtake him. He stumbled toward the others, pain shooting through his side, but he kept moving. He had no time to rest. Let's move, Kieran ordered, his voice strained but firm. We're not out of this yet. The team rushed toward the waiting transport ship, each of them moving with the practiced efficiency of soldiers who knew what was at stake. Kieran glanced back one last time as the Wraithlord facility continued to shake, the walls cracking as the self-destruct countdown neared its end. They boarded the transport, and as the doors sealed behind them, the ship's engines roared to life. The facility's destruction was imminent, but Kieran couldn't let himself relax just yet. They had the data, but at what cost? The Wraithlords had learned far too much about humanity's potential, and this was only the beginning. As the ship ascended into the dark expanse of space, Kieran leaned back in his seat, wiping the sweat from his forehead. His team was safe for now. But the Wraithlords would come. They always came. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. And this time, humanity would fight back with everything they had. We'll make them regret underestimating us, Kieran muttered under his breath, as the stars stretched out before him. The war had only just begun.